What's going on, everyone? Happy New Year, happy 2026. This video is going to be a Q&A in celebration of reaching 10K subscribers. Now, I hit this mark a little bit before the start of the new year, but I got absolutely wrecked by the flu, so I haven't been able to make this video. But now I'm feeling a bit more back to life. I can actually talk now. Tell you what, the flu is bad this year, so stay healthy. Anyways, thank you guys so much for engaging with the channel and subscribing. It means the world to be able to put this stuff out into the public and actually help people and make a difference. I really find these long form videos to be much more suitable for my style of teaching. Just set the camera up and go in depth on one specific topic as opposed to making these shorter form videos for Instagram and TikTok, which I still enjoy, but I really do find the YouTube format to be much better suited to my style of teaching. Anyways, I had some good questions here, and of course I had some silly ones as well, which I will share. And I don't do these Q&As often because I do get a lot of people reaching out with very personalized injury-related questions, to which I will always answer, hey, this requires a one-on-one assessment based on your individual needs, individual restrictions, individual level. So if you are going through anything injury-related that you would like some more hands-on guidance, please reach out and we can have an assessment call and discuss treatment options. That being said, let's get into some of these questions. So, number one, ready for this one? Will stretching every day make me taller, or should I keep waiting for my second round of puberty? This is an adult male in his 30s. I think he's well past puberty, and I think he's well past the hopes of getting taller. Now, that being said, I have a lot of unique drills out there, and I don't like telling people, hey, it's too late for you. So that being said, my man, keep stretching your tightest areas, keep stretching your hip flexors. The psoas, as you know, that's the root of everyone's dysfunction. Stretch your psoas, you might get a little bit taller. But just know your height is good enough. I think you just should wait for that second round of puberty. Yeah. Anyways, number two, how to program side splits training on a weekly basis. So, great question. The side splits. It's one of these stretches. So when it comes to like the big compound stretches, side splits, front splits, deep back bends, back bridges, I find these stretches need to be treated like compound strength exercises, like we would, a back squat, a deadlift, a heavy bench press, these very neurologically taxing lifts. The side splits can be looked at as the same. So when we're programming side splits, we do need to be careful about other lower body training that is adductor intensive. So the side splits, in particular the adductor magnus, gets used a lot in deep squatting, deep lunging. So when we're embarking on side splits, I do prefer people to dial back their leg training just a bit. Of course, you could get stronger and more flexible in the same cycle, but when it comes to really prioritizing the side splits, we need to keep those adductors fresh. Now, for most people, I think once a week side split training is enough to keep things ticking along. We're working in a lengthened position of the adductors. So whenever we're doing lengthened dominant strength training, which is what mobility is, right? It's highly specific end range strength training. It's going to require more of a recovery demand. So once a week side splits, it gives you a little bit of freedom to, train your front split later in the week. You could train, heavy squatting, deadlifting, stuff that, uses the adductors through the mid-range as well. and I do think that's a safe bet. I do think, how I do it is twice a week currently, but I train my front splits and my side splits on the exact same day so that I get to recover my legs in between. This is a bit more of an advanced structure for training your splits, doing them both on the same day. And you have to have some level of stretch tolerance built up to where you don't need so many accessory and warm-up exercises. So for my side splits, I do just a little bit of warm-up, grease up the hips, and then the side splits is my exercise. I might do some wall kettlebell flies, and then the same with the front splits. I don't have too many accessory exercises for the front split. Now, if you are more of a beginner, I think it is very beneficial to have some of these accessory exercises. So you might be starting off a session with a general warm-up, get your hips rotating, get blood flow going, and then you're going to want some specific exercises targeted toward your main limitation in the side split. So maybe you're doing like a weighted butterfly and like a loaded pigeon stretch, and then maybe you're going into like a half split slide out where you're kneeling, one leg straight, you slide it out on a slider, maybe you're holding a weight in front, or you could do a wall kettlebell middle split. That's an exercise I love. So you're really prepping the adductors with a straight leg, and then bring it all together into a side split, whether you're doing relaxed holds, contract relax method, contract relax agonist contract, where you're contracting the stretched muscles, then you're contracting the shortening muscles to pull you deeper into the range. Maybe you're doing straight isometrics, maybe you're doing eccentrics, just depends on where you're at with your training, but you'll probably end with that. So this is a beefy session. This will take you 45, 60 minutes. It's going to require recovery. You're going to probably only want to do it once a week. And then on the days in between, just recover. You could do some static, relaxed stretching, nothing that tries to push the boundaries of flexibility. I would say you can also do it twice a week as well. Maybe spaced 4 days apart, 3-4 days apart, where you have a very intense day of side splits where you're really going for more range, and then you have another day where you're training, but you're not, the focus isn't pushing range. Maybe you're just trying to build strength, backed out, maybe 80%, 75 to 85% range zone where you're just building some strength. Maybe you're just building some stretch tolerance in a backed out range. But you could think of this as kind of like a high and a low day, where this is a lower form of stimulus, and you have another day which is a higher form of stimulus, where you're really going for adaptation. So a very loaded question. I could keep going on and on, but we can apply this to side splits as well as front split as well as back bend. How did you get so awesome? Does it have to do anything with that hair? This is my coach right here, Jay Mayberg, Explore the Movement. This is him fishing for compliments. He obviously wants me to say, I got so awesome because of you, coach. And that is the answer. Thank you so much for all the gains. So I've had a coach for the past 3 or 4 years or so. Jay, he's been helping me with my gymnastic strength, getting me to one-arm handstands, planches, 90-degree push-ups, all that stuff, all that fun stuff you see me doing on Instagram. Shout out to my coach. Coaches need coaches, remember that. Okay, is anterior pelvic tilt, APT, really a bad thing or tolerable? So I guess that means, is it bad, or can you live with it? Is it fine? We all have some degree of anterior pelvic tilt. It's the natural resting pelvic position. Now, when it becomes a bad thing is if you can't access a posterior pelvic tilt. Maybe the front musculature of your body is so restricted that you simply don't have access to being able to posteriorly rotate the pelvis. And then that shows in your movement. It's restricting your ability to extend the hip. You struggle with front splits. Maybe you are getting some back pain, some anterior hip pain. You have trouble with the hip staying centrated. So this is the thing. It's like we care more about the objective measures, less about how you carry your resting posture. I tend to walk around in an anterior pelvic tilt. I don't have any back pain. I'm virtually out of hip pain. I have very much so struggled with hip extension. That is one of my main limitations. But as my hip extension has gotten better to where I'm almost at a front split, my resting posture hasn't really changed that much. I have had people tell me that I do look like I'm walking around with way less resting tension than I used to in the past, but I still carry that anterior pelvic tilt with me. And so I don't think it's a bad thing. I would just care more about your movement options associated around the anterior pelvic tilt. You look at rock climbers, they're so kyphotic, but that doesn't always mean they have limited thoracic extension. They can't get their arms fully overhead. So I do think posture tells a story, but it's not the entire picture. We have to dive deeper to see what the main restrictions are. So we could speculate. Okay, you're rounded forward like this. Perhaps you have tight pecs. Perhaps you have, reduced the ability to extend the thoracic spine, rotate the thoracic spine. But then once you assess, you might be disproven. So yeah, let's not always take posture at face value. Let's look at the objective markers. Let's see how someone is actually moving under load, without load, and so on. Okay, and that leads into favorite exercises to improve kyphosis. So kyphosis meaning the natural thoracic flexion curve, which is a natural thing. So excessive kyphosis happens when you cannot extend the thoracic spine and flexion is your only option. So I do find that people who are very hyperkyphotic, they first and foremost have a hard time rotating the thoracic spine because flexion offers more degrees of freedom in the spine. If we were stuck here, try rotating with a very rigid spinal extension. Okay, if we allow that to relax, now we have much more freedom to rotate. So I do find people who can't rotate, they often hang out more in a flexed position because this gives them more degrees of freedom to then move. So first and foremost, we want to improve thoracic rotation. There's plenty of drills on my channel. I think a very simple but super effective drill is the one where I'm against the wall. So I'm in a chair, seated down. I like to have a foam roller in between my knees. I'm against the wall, basically pushing against the wall, pulling with my opposite hand into rotation, contract, relax, breathing and relaxing, and then trying to shift my inside knee forward, which relatively rotates my pelvis to the other side. So that's a relative, if I'm going this direction, a relative right side trunk rotation as the pelvis rotates left. So a drill like that, you could do that with contract, relax. Maybe I could put that drill, link it in the description. And then after that, when it comes to thoracic extension, I love hand-anchored drills where the arm is in full shoulder flexion. So if you've seen me do basically arm anchored on a barbell on a bench, and then your upper back is on the edge of a bench being used as a fulcrum to extend that thoracic spine, and you're just dropping the hips. There's many variations you can do with that drill. You could just hold there, contract, relax. You can actively move the pelvis up and down. You can hold a weight on top of the hips to passively sink you lower. You can do many different things in that position, and I find that improves the thoracic extension better than anything else. And then you can superset this with active cobra drills where you're prone on the ground and then propping yourself up on fingertips and then just squeezing the hell out of the upper back, just really trying to compress the upper back segments. So honestly, even everything from the high cervical spine all the way into the sacrum, just really trying to squeeze that upper back. And these are great options for improving that overly kyphotic posture. Okay, let's see, distinguishing between lat and teres major restrictions. So this is a good question. Both are going to restrict overhead positioning, but we have to understand the lat connects to the pelvis. So the lat crosses the lumbar spine, the pelvis, the ribs, and the humerus, whereas the teres major basically just crosses the humerus. So how you could tell the difference, lay on your back, bend your knees, because now this will start to posteriorly tilt the pelvis, and this brings the more proximal fibers of the lat on length. And then you want to see, as you go overhead with external rotation, how early does the ribs start to flare. I think rib flare is more of a better indication of tight lats because the whole spinal column is wanting to extend. Whereas the teres major doesn't really cross the spine. So what you could do is lay down, pin down the scapula down and back, and then move the humerus. A lot of times teres major restrictions, people are going to use that upward rotation of the scapula and the trunk to assist, whether it's side bending, whether it's anything where the scapula is really guiding that upward rotation. So a drill I like to do to lengthen the teres major is actually side bend to the same side, and say I'm holding a stick here. I can raise my arm into flexion while I'm side bent to that same side, so that prevents, I'm actually shortening the lat here. You'll feel the lat kind of crunching down, but now I'm preventing that upward rotation of the scapula as I move overhead. So now we're just lengthening the muscles that connect the humerus to the scapula, which in this case would be the teres major. So main things, lats, they're going to have that pelvic involvement, so maintaining a posterior pelvic tilt will stretch the lats. It's not going to stretch the teres major. So hopefully that makes sense. How to prevent cramping in the hamstrings during feet elevated bridges. So this tells me you're probably dragging the heels back in an attempt to extend the hip, and that's causing some cramping in the shortened ranges. And then your knees are probably a bit too bent. So this might mean you might need to elevate the feet a little bit more. You might need to lengthen out your distance between your hands and your heels temporarily, and then work your way in over time. And then just think about really strongly posteriorly tilting the pelvis and driving the hips directly vertical. I think hip extension is hugely underrated when it comes to expressing your deepest back bridge, but it should be coming from the glutes. So if your hamstrings are really cramping, that is telling me you're not truly extending the hip. You're moving through this knee flexion type of torque. So really think posterior tilt, drive the hips up to the ceiling, and attempt to straighten out the legs. Okay, next question. Is FAI still a problem for you? So FAI, femoral acetabular impingement, something I was diagnosed with long ago. It's what got me into all of this mobility work and rehab stuff. Is it a problem for me? Not really. I could do everything I want to do. I could squat heavy. I'm training for the splits. I could run. I could sprint. I don't do too much running anymore. People ask me all the time if I still play soccer. I don't, but it's just because of all the other stuff I'm interested in training right now, the gymnastic strength. all the stuff that's taken up a lot of time in my life now. But I can do all of that stuff. FAI is not a death sentence. It's not automatically going to mean you need surgery. I never got surgery. And I guarantee what's been going on in my hip is still in there. And you know what? I'm not going to say, like it's never going to be a problem for people. I still get flare-ups here and there. I train hard. And I think it's a completely normal thing because I do have added bone growth in my hips. I do have labral tears. Like that stuff isn't going away. That stuff isn't healing. But I have conditioned the tissues around my hip to be very tolerant to compressed positions of the hip, impinged positions in the hip. Impingement is a normal process. I'm impinging right now. My supraspinatus tendon is being jammed against the acromion right now, and there's no pain. We should be able to compress tissues. These tissues should be tolerable to compression. And this comes with, strengthening and adequate mobility work, making sure there's space, making sure we have movement options. But it's not a problem for me. I've improved the rotation of my hip. I've improved my ability to flex and extend my hip. But I do have flare-ups when I'm overtraining, when I'm overly stressed, just like everyone else. But these flare-ups aren't anything that take me out for a long time. I go about proper load management, scale things back temporarily, and then everything is good. Okay? So next one, hip shifting to the right. Which KPI or key performance indicator to try and see what's going on with my body? So I guess, yeah, that's saying what key performance indicator will tell me what's going on with a hip shift to the right. Tough to say. Hip shifting can be due to a lot of different things. Most of the time it's due to pain. So your body is shifting away from a side of pain, whether that's hip pain, knee pain, ankle. I've seen it in either of these joints, even like an SI joint in the low back. Oftentimes, though, if it is mobility restriction and it's not related to pain, it could be ankle dorsiflexion on the opposite leg, or it could be a lack of hip flexion or internal rotation on the side you're shifting away from. Typically, the body will shift away from the side with less space and into the side with more space, more posterior capsule lengthening, more availability for that hip to shift posterior in the socket when it comes to a squat. We also need to differentiate, is it a true shift in the frontal plane? Is it a rotation in the transverse plane? Is the pelvis rotating away? Or is the pelvis hiking? Is it more of a frontal plane where one side is simply higher than the other? In that case, I would look at hip flexion. Can the hip flex on the side that you're shifting away from? Can we rotate internally and externally? So I think a general screen of the hip, a general assessment will tell you what's going on with your body. So I'm not going to just say, check internal rotation, check hip flexion, check whatever specific thing. Check it all, right? See what the main limitation is. Oftentimes you'll see a glaring asymmetry side to side. That's probably worth addressing, in my opinion. Of course, if you have no hip pain, whatever, if it's not broken, don't fix it. But, I do think some form of symmetry is good to work on, especially if there's pain associated with it and performance decreases. Okay, last question here. Does nutrition play a role in improving mobility and getting out of pain? Yes, but also no, because I know so many unhealthy people that move extremely well and aren't in any pain, like people, parkour athletes, circus athletes. They'll do a full training session where they're flipping around, whatever, and then they'll go out at night and stay out till 3 a.m. drinking beer, being unhealthy. Meanwhile, someone like me, I'm in bed early, I'm eating super clean, yet I still get aches and pains. So I think the training is the most important thing, building capacity. But yes, I think nutrition does play a role. And who knows, some of these people that I mentioned, they could be, you know, a fuse set to blow at any moment. They could be, on the brink of an injury, and they might wish they took nutrition more carefully. But the main thing is eat for health. What's going to keep you in the gym longest and not getting sick? Because getting sick is what will lead to a setback. It's what's going to lead to reduced recovery. Stay healthy. That's the number one thing. Get adequate protein so, we can repair and rebuild. And I think one of the main problems I see with people who are injured is they don't eat enough during the recovery process. They think, oh, I'm not going to be loading my body as much. I'm not going to be training as hard. So I'm going to eat much less. I'm going to adopt like a low carb approach. And next thing you know, the recovery is challenged because, tissue repair is a metabolically expensive process. We need to rely on resources in the body. And if we're not getting enough calories, then the body is going to have to allocate the resources it has to just maintaining its daily functions and not actually repairing, collagen synthesis, bone remodeling, angiogenesis, which is new blood vessel formation. All of this stuff requires adequate nutrients. Now, of course, don't get fat. I think a small surplus or maintenance calories is ideal. You don't need to go overboard and just say, oh, well, this is all going to recovery and just eating a bunch of cookies and whatnot. No, get your protein, get adequate calories, and take in a lot of vitamin C. It's really important for collagen synthesis as well. Protein, 0.8 grams to maybe 1 gram per pound of body weight is ideal. But yeah, the main thing, eat for health and make sure you're eating enough so that you have the resources to be used toward tissue repair. And yeah, you're not going to be training as hard as well, so we want to mitigate as much muscle loss as possible. So get the protein in, get the calories in. I'm no nutrition guy, so I don't speak on it too often. I'm not going to tell you what foods to cut out of your diet that are going to be inflammatory for you. That's going to be on a very individual level. I think eating a whole foods-based diet, you can't really go wrong with that. But yeah, that's basically how I go about things. Okay, that's all the time I have. I have a few clients coming up. Thank you so much for this. If you enjoyed this Q&A, maybe we'll do it again. How about when we hit 20K subscribers? If these were helpful at all, please let me know in the comments. Once again, thank you guys so much for subscribing and engaging with the channel. Happy New Year. Write in the comments section. I'm curious. What are some of your guys' goals for 2026? Training, lifestyle, whatever it is. Put it in the comments. Let's have a conversation about it. All right, guys, stay supple. Peace.